We return to Ikora with the knowledge that the relic is able to shape a weapon out of a fragment. Ikora suggests that it was almost like we shaped the weapon based on its own memory, meaning that somehow the relic can manipulate time. Can Savathun also use the relic? Or even the fragment? Ikora doesn't know, and we definitely don't. Thus, forces us to return to Savathun's throne world in order to gain some more knowledge on this situation, which is something we can just do. Surely we don't take the cannon into the lore and then through the portal every time in order to reach Savathun's throne world, right? But how else are we able to reach this location? This is never addressed. The situation with the relic is also never addressed, but it is used later. I guess they really had to justify crafting, and at least they did tie it into the story, so there's that at the very least. We find ourselves back in Savathun's throne world in the Queen's Bailey. Our ghost supposes that the Hive world is made out of light based on Eris's information, which says throne worlds are kingdoms of thought, built according to the desires of their creator. Our ghost questions why Savathun is letting us walk into her throne world. That's a great question, but I would like to know how we were here in the first place. Someone named Finch contacts us over comms and informs us that we aren't supposed to be here. This situation is unfortunately a lot more complex than that. I'll just assume that the reason we are back here in Savathun's own world is by the aforementioned reason of taking the portal through the lore, and having us actually play through that entire section over and over again would be a pointless exercise in misery. From the end of the last mission, we realized that while our execution was brilliant, our plan played completely into the hands of Savathun. So that means Savathun does actually want us to be in her throne world. This is only made even more confusing because I'm not even sure how we managed to escape Savathun's grasp at the end of the last mission in the first place. The best guess I have is that Savathun ejected us from her throne world, but now I'm not sure why Savathun would release us when she has us captured in the first place. Why is our guardian and ghost not questioning this? With Ikora's intrusion in the end, maybe her and Eris actually did something which allowed us to return to Mars, but I have no idea what transpired, and that just seems like a major gap in my knowledge. Our ghost questions the voice contacting us, and Finch is all evasive when it comes to answering our questions. He just tells us to get out of here before Savathun realizes that we are in her throne world. Unfortunately, I refuse to believe that this random person knows that we are in Savathun's throne world, and Savathun herself does not know that we are in her throne world. Ah, what a clunky sentence. Regardless, since this person did take their time to contact us, somehow they count as a lead, and thus finding the source of their signal is probably something we should do. We're able to pick up some deep sight off the ground, somehow, and this allows us to access some alternate dimension platforms. What deep sight is, and why it just exists on the ground as a buff we can pick up, is never explained. This is a reoccurring mechanic throughout the campaign, and it just existing without even the tiniest bit of exploration into its nature is a little weird. These platforms take us through some dark hallways where we need to activate deep sight again in order to jump onto some more platforms before clearing out some mobs. You control yourself in this section pretty easily if you don't pay attention. I'm able to get a much better look at the statues of Savathun in this area, and yeah, they are very much so inspired by Alien and Geiger's overall stylings. A theme that is common throughout the Hive, but so much more apparent in Savathun's ship and throne world. Finch contacts us again because we're causing a commotion rather than just sneaking away like he advised us to do. Our ghost cuts the chase and asks Finch what they know about the Hive wielding the light. Our actions allow Finch to realize that we won't just vanish like he desired, and thus agrees to meet up with us outside of Savathun's fortress in order to make our intrusion more meaningful. Our ghost tracks onto the location of Finch, and we have to make our way outside of Savathun's fortress. In order to do so, we need to open up a gate in order to progress, and in doing so, we end up tripping some alarm signals. This requires us to capture a point as we defeat the swarming Hive. This isn't too bad, as I managed to complete this section on the first try without much difficulty. Once the gate is open, we talk with our ghost. Ghost voices his concerns and believes that Finch is most likely not from the Vanguard. Seeing as we're unable to identify him, that's not the most out there of guesses. The more interesting thought, though, is that he thinks that perhaps this voice is actually just Savathun disguising herself. This actually lines up with exactly what I was thinking. We're like a moth, and this one hint of where to go is the flame drawing us in, especially since we don't know what Savathun is up to at this moment. We reach a quagmire and place down a campaign banner. Our ghost is able to identify some enemies in the distance and recognizes them as the Scorn. According to him, the Scorn don't tend to just show up without receiving explicit directions, so now we have to question why these enemies are here in the first place. As I try to approach the group, I immediately get blasted by some lightning and am basically sent to critical health. I find the nearest bit of cover and consume my solar nade in order to activate some bracers, and heat rises. I also go ahead and place my well down, but the barrier guard goes down much faster than I anticipated. As I work my way towards the second barrier guard, a loosened moth explodes and instantly kills me. Sure, I was regaining health, but one moth dealing 75 to 80% of my total health seems just a little bit ridiculous to me. The second time around, I just went ahead and repeated the same tactic as my first attempt, but I maintained a little bit more distance this time around. It wasn't until after I cleared all of the adds that I focused my attention on the guards. I went ahead and hit this one with a single pump of my shotgun in order to activate Bane Switch, which allows my Apex Predator to take the second one out. I did the same thing to the third barrier guard. Their deaths drew the attention of a light-bearing wizard alongside several more barrier guards. This wizard is actually pretty spooky due to its massive DPS at close ranges, and its erratic movement made hitting it with my rocket launcher a much more difficult task. Nonetheless, I crush its ghost and am able to drop the barrier in order to progress. As we do so, our ghost voices concerns that it is still uncomfortable with the fact that hive ghosts exist. Ghost then lets us know that all ghosts were created after the collapse. This is information that our guardian should probably already know, and while I know the purpose of this line is to catch newer players up, I think that's a pointless struggle. This repetition of information takes me out just a little, but the larger problem I have is that this wasted dialogue could have been otherwise used to further develop our ghost's feelings instead of just stating a fact. I have the same issue with our ghost following line of it stating the fact of ghost choosing hive instead of a human. Yes, that's why there are hive ghosts. We've repeated this information like 10 times by now. Regardless, as we exit the fortress, the rest of the throne world reveals itself as a dark swamp-like location. This darker and much more grim location stands in stark contrast to the much more vibrant and lucent fortress. As we reach Finch, we realize that he was actually a hive ghost this entire time. This officially completes the mission. Our next objective is to talk with Finch, but because this location is currently being instanced, I'm unable to talk to him without launching the next mission in order to enter a non-instant version of the throne world. I don't exactly have a problem with this, but it's weird that the mission end timer is a whole 30 seconds when there's nothing else for us to do. We talk to Finch. Finch reveals to us that he used to be a ghost of a hive knight. In fact, his host is on the ground right now, but he decided not to revive him. Honestly, I never even considered that as a possibility, but imagine if our ghost just decided not to revive us. In any case, after a considerable amount of time, Finch eventually began to have doubts that the travelers included killing other guardians with and believes that Savathun is up to no good. As a light bearer who has killed many hive, including ones that wielded the light, I would argue that this is probably within the traveler's expectations, especially since hive ghosts have a unique look, and we as guardians can now wield the darkness. Besides, we know that the traveler once gifted the Lixnay, so I don't think it has any hard feelings on that front. We also don't really know what the traveler wants besides not wanting to die. That's pretty much it. We just have a ghost, and the rest so far has been up to us to make do. It just so happens that a lot of our enemies also want to kill the traveler. Regardless, this internal conflict immediately makes Finch quite the interesting character and a foil to our own ghost. Finch points us towards an abandoned hive temple where we should head to first in order to search for some more clues. This is also technically where Finch first tells us his name, but I was able to read his name from whenever he first contacted us. The well of text provides us with some more details. Finch isn't sending us to the temple for no reason, but instead has some proof of the Lucent Brood's shady schemes. He hands us a fragment that he swiped from the apothecary wing, with his hands. Its purpose is unknown outside of the fact that it's used in some sort of twisted hive ritual. We bring it to the evidence board. Ikora's agents have been hard at work, but haven't been able to produce any concrete pieces of evidence. This fragment is the best we've gotten so far. We take a better look at said fragment and are able to connect its appearance to some metallic ore that we've seen back at the throne world. If we find some of that ore, we should then be able to compare the samples in order to gain a better understanding of what we are looking at.